but how it only seems there's only one place to start. And I think, as Jason and Lee alluded to, that explosive press conference, which you was a part of. Now, we've listened to the dulcet tones of Jack Pitt-Brooker was there, Dan Kilpatrick. You was also in that room. And before we come on to just everything Antonio Conte and Tottenham Hotspur, just give us a feeling what that press conference was like to be part of.
As a journalist, incredible. It had everything, as a journalist you could possibly want in a press conference. Because I asked the first question. So I was front row, only 5-6 feet away from him. So you can literally feel the hot air on you, the hairdryer kind of thing. And I started off, it was a reasonable enough question. Essentially, how did you chuck away a 3-1 kind of lead with 15 minutes to go? And he'd come in with his message. We'd heard little kind of snippets in the radio interviews that we get the text from. We could see he had this theme about selfishness he wanted to talk about. But he just gave this long answer. And you could see he was winding himself up more and more as it was going on. And then obviously, I think it was Dan asked the second one, which was the one that just was like the incendiary kind of moment. Just essentially, really, is your future, the uncertainty, has it proved any part of this? It was the last thing he wanted to hear. He got about 6 words into the question and he just went like that. And the trouble is, there's this weird thing that happens with the Spurs managers. I don't know if it's because I'm there all the time and I'm this familiar face they see. But what they'll do quite a lot, mid-answer to someone else, they'll turn to me. And it's like, and I really don't want them to, because I'm furiously typing it up because we do a live blog. And they look at me and then they start ranting at me as well. So I was getting a lot of the kind of the blowback almost from the answers to Dan and the other journalists as well. And he kept looking across at me as if like saying, like, you better be typing this down. You better be getting all of this kind of thing. And it's like, But it was amazing. It was everything that we predicted, unfortunately, about 16 months ago would probably happen at some point. And the Chelsea reporters I know said, "Oh, you're going to get a press conference like that at some point. He'll just lay it all out there." And that was what we got. And it was crazy. It was incredible. It was fascinating, really, to see where he went with it and knowing that. I mean, it all stopped and we all kind of just looked at each other afterwards. We just were like, what has he just done? He's just kind of torched his relationship with the players pretty much. He's thrown every single one of them under the bus, rightly or wrongly in some cases. And obviously he'd said all this stuff about the culture of the club, which despite him going to the board and trying to clarify afterwards, is like, no. Sorry, you've absolutely very much shone a big light once again on the lack of silverware and the culture at the club. And it was just 10 minutes. It was incredible. It was only 4 questions, but he gave such a long answer to my first one as well. And all the other answers were quite in-depth as well. I think 4 questions was probably enough, because God knows what would happen if he got a 5th or a 6th in. He might have had a heart attack or something. He was getting so angry. And he just, at the end, you've probably seen it, he just stands up and goes, "Thank you," and walks off. Yeah. But actually at the start, he apologised for being late.
Like a mic drop.
Yeah, it was. And he kept playing with the microphone in front of him. He kept doing all these little ticks. He kept like whacking the desk, and it just had this mic. You'll see it in front of me. He keeps moving it around like a chess piece. It was really weird. No, it was incredible. We've had a few with him. We've had Mura and Burnley. We've had really interesting pressers, but this was a whole other level. Incredible.
Just what I want to ask you as a follow-up is, what was the reaction, Ali, after he left the press conference? What did you guys do as journos in the room after he left?
Gathered round the desk and just all kind of wow. Because you play it back in your mind and you kind of think, did he really say that? Did he actually say that bit? Did he talk? Yeah, he did. And then you're kind of, all of you are, you're immediately forming your headlines, your intros, everything in your head is trying to form. And yeah, I wouldn't say we were stunned. It was more, it sounds awful to say, and obviously it's not what the fans want to hear, but as journalists, you're kind of excited. It is, it's this like, wow, there's so much we can dig into. There was so many different angles in that press conference. You look at, like I said, you can look at the players, you can look at the club culture. I mean, how many times have we seen a manager call all his 11 players selfish? I can't even remember that. It was like they're playing for themselves, It was just incredible. And like kind of John said earlier, you do wonder, like, say that quite iffy penalty wasn't given at the end, or Longley had headed that, would we have had that?
do you think that FA Cup game has been a bit of a turning point in this season?
I think so. Harry Kane used a great expression. He said it was like a dagger in our hearts. And I think that was what it was, the most realistic bit of silverware. And as soon as that kind of flame was extinguished, they all just lost something, didn't they? It was like a mini version of, after, I know this was a far bigger thing, but when they lost the Champions League final, the whole season after that was a lot of players knowing that they'd their chance had gone, and the best chance they had of something was gone. And this was like a smaller scale version of it. And yeah, you could see it. And then to go into that huge Champions League game with it was the meekest exit I've ever seen a team put in a Champions League. It was embarrassing at times. You're at home as well in front of 62,000 people. It was just so poor. No, I think you're right. I think that was the moment. And it is awkward, the fact that some of the best wins in the last month or so he wasn't there for. I do think that's going to be something that's going to be an awkward thing with the players as well. It's not his fault, obviously something really rubbish happened to him, which is why he couldn't be there and he was recovering. And honestly, if you saw him as close up as we did out in Milan and how bad he looked having come back too early, he desperately needed to kind of recover properly. But yeah, they won 3 big games against City, West Ham and Chelsea without him. And I do wonder whether the whole mentality started to shift when he was coming back that week. I think Jason's right. I think I'd agree with pretty much everything he said. I would just say that he also left something out, and that was himself. He wasn't going to take any responsibility himself whatsoever. But what I would say is everything he said is quite right. I think those players, a lot of them do live in this culture at the club of, there's another day. And, as we were saying about the dagger through the heart, you've got to show your heart first for it to have a dagger in it in the first place. And they didn't show any heart in what they did. So I agree with that. And I agree with the culture. But yeah, I think we were all thinking, especially, and that was why the question was asked about his own future and creating this whole just kind of atmosphere of uncertainty where no one really knows what's going to happen next. I do feel he removed himself from any blame in that point, and that's the only thing I felt it was missing. But managers, that's not just him. Every manager's got that little bit of ego. That's why they're the best in the world, because they kind of shut out any criticism of themselves, and sometimes that makes a little bit of, I guess, a lack of self-awareness. But it was a good rant, a good tirade anyway.